So yeah, so like obviously, as you guys know, I go around debating people about the existence of God, and I've got a flow chart now. So we've got, yeah, it needs a little bit of work. If anybody wants the flow chart, just drop me a DM
You want to post it in chat?
we can go through it. I don't really want to share it. Like, I mean, we need to tweak it a little bit before I distribute it wholesale.
Well,
but
the final version, I can appreciate that. Yeah. Okay.
It's got too much. It's got too much information about Greg Botson in it at the minute. I have to edit the text.
That sounds exciting. Can you send it to us?
Well, I'll bring it up on the screen. If you bring my Theist Experience bot up thing, then I'll share it on the screen.
We have flowcharts for the precept scripts that you guys run too. I'm just curious to compare your version of it with ours.
I've only just started building this one. It's pretty fun. Anyway, don't know if you guys know it. Obviously, I'm a big AI boy. I do a lot of AI, and yeah, well, obviously, it's a battle. You know what I mean? We're using the AIs now against each other at the highest level of debate, and these flowcharts from Claude are destroying you guys. Claude actually gets it. You know what I mean? And I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen some of these AIs arguing about presuppositional apologetics, but I mean, it's pretty much on our side.
Is it presuppositional apologetics just assuming the answer and thus trying to be an asshole to everybody else?
No, it's exposing the fact that other people have presuppositions. In fact, it's been branded as presuppositional apologetics, but the fact is that the foundations of our worldview aren't presupposed based on some kind of unjustified presupposition, right?
That's
or an assumption. That's the atheist worldview.
Let's get to it.
What we've got justified true beliefs, which is knowledge that are justified within the principle of sufficient reasoning and accounted for within a coherent web of justified beliefs.
That's
okay.
Cool.
So we've got foundational positions.
Very quickly, why do you believe that a God exists, and why do you believe that Jesus resurrected from the dead?
Because in order to know anything was true, then you'd have to have some kind of authority that could account for the truth value of a proposition. That's your God. So if you know you exist, then God exists.
Yeah, I don't accept that.
Do you need an authority to fill out a crossword puzzle?
What is the authority that makes it true that you exist?
That the authority that makes that I exist? Well, I exist because of a process of biology and chemistry.
Is that absolute truth? Could you be wrong about that?
I would get rid of absolute. It's the truth. Yes, it's the truth.
So this is it. We're on the flow chart. You've made a claim, a random claim. Start with any knowledge claim or moral statement.
Sure,
but it's maximally
do you believe in absolute truth?
Just like
you said
God
no.
Can't be
you said no. Let's scroll
powerful, right? It can't make a rock heavy that it can't lift it, right?
I also didn't hear an explanation for why you think that God exists and why Jesus is the resurrected Son of God. But
we'll get to that.
Why
I was showing the flow chart, guys.
Sure, why we came from biology and chemistry, why I know that we came from sex, unless you had sort of scientific means.
Okay, we'll go back. We'll go back to the start.
Okay, so you apply the same thing to Christianity, though?
Yeah, truth can only be maximally truthful, right?
Look, so start with any knowledge claim. You know, you said that we're a biological organism. Do you believe in absolute truth? No, you refuse to answer that, but we all know that you don't.
I think that dual-sided words like that are politically correct, and I think when you
Come on, please, let me read the response. This is Greg Bonson's response.
Let me explain that when you use those, you are muddying the water. If you would actually be more honest if you use truth instead of absolute truth, and by using absolute truth, I think you're being dishonest.
I disagree, and Greg Botson does too. Here's the response from Botson.
Okay, let's hear it.
Self-refuting statement. If no absolute truth is itself an absolute truth claim. Internal contradiction exposed cannot consistently live or argue without assuming absolute standards. So there you go. Greg Botson destroyed.
Sure, that doesn't prove that absolute
from the grave.
You're just
this is the
reasserting it.
chart.
You're just.
It's pretty interesting. We've got all of these different things here. We've got the scientific empiricism, human reason, social contract, personal experience. This is the ultimate foundation for truth. And then over here we've got the religious stuff with pantheism, non-Trinitarian monotheism, polytheism, deism, and each one's got its own debunker, basically.
Sure, but we know through scientific means. We know, biologically speaking, that is how babies are made, unless in a lab. I would like to know how you know Jesus resurrected from the dead.
I mean, we can get into that. So, I mean, I don't know if you've seen, there's a lot of people that have testified to that. We've got the Shroud of Turin, where he burst into life.
That is a known hoax. So just going back into dishonesty, these are people who were dishonest. They're liars. They are lying for Jesus. They think that lying and creating hoaxes is a way of supporting their own religion. Does that help a little bit?
I disagree with you on that.
Sure, but the academic community does.
I think that when we look back at the historicity and all of the manuscripts, and we do an analysis based on the same standards that we look into things like, the history of somebody like, William the Conqueror or something, then we have to admit that we've got the best evidence for Jesus out of anyone from history.
Well, he said he existed.
There's a lot of people there that said that they saw him after he was crucified. So
Justin the Martyr directly addresses the fact that all of the other claims of all the other rising from the dead holy men, of about 20 examples that he gives in his first apologetic, he says all of these are no different than ours. And he includes eyewitness accounts of people that said that Caesar rose from the dead upon his funeral pyre, right? Now, we don't need to go into the fact that rising from the dead was just a standard feature of holy divine men in prophetic and eschatological beliefs at the time. It's just not interesting. Now you're going to say, oh, well, here's all this evidence that people say
this
was
guy
true.
Asked me
Paul
for
said that 500 people witnessed it.
I've got better evidence than he's got. That's all I'm saying.
500 witnesses are available to prove it. Look, it's just obvious that this is an idea copied from other belief systems at the time. There's no reason to think. It's like saying, look, I think that every scammer who promises to give you $1 billion, like a Nigerian prince email, is fake, except ours, because ours.
So what you're doing is
500 people. We have 500 people that swear that they received $1 million from the Nigerian prince email.
You're saying that you can prove that Jesus didn't resurrect.
Ours is different.
Is that what you're
because
claiming?
We have 500 witnesses who claim to be eyewitnesses. And then when we say, well, where are the eyewitnesses? Let me finish. You're not hearing me out. Okay. When we say, where are the 500 witnesses that Paul cites in one of his letters, supposedly, which maybe he didn't even write, then we say, where is that person? Where are any attestations of that? There's none. There is no hard evidence of a Jesus resurrection. What there is evidence of is that a belief in Jesus rising from the dead somehow changed over time. Lots of different groups had lots of different beliefs in it, and eventually it arrived at the story that we have today.
Look, so obviously, Paul says a lot of stuff, and one of the things that he also says is, for though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons that we fight with are not weapons of this world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish every argument and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. We take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ, and we'll be there to punish every act of disobedience when your disobedience is complete. And today, when I came in, I showed you guys this flowchart, and straight away, you denied absolute truth, and that leaves your whole position redundant, essentially.
Unfortunately, you didn't stick to the flowchart.
It's a self-refuting statement. You guys have contradicted yourself by holding this position, and you fall flat. Look, this is crazy, because this is the least interesting part of the flowchart, right? You got stopped here. But if you were like more in depth about your worldview, maybe you could have got to this stage, or maybe over here where the religious views are. But instead, you know, we didn't even get to see any of that.
But we're trying to get you
got debunked here.
We're trying to get you out of presuppositionalism, however.
Right, to evidentialism. And you brought up Jesus's resurrection, and I pointed out that Justin the Martyr said that it was unexceptional as a claim to say that Jesus rose from the dead, because every other group in the area has a story of a holy figure that rises from the dead. He gave the example of Caesar having eyewitnesses saying they saw him rise from the dead. And then he says, don't persecute us because we are just like you. So if you want to learn more about the actual problems with the belief in the resurrection of Christianity that arise from the unremarkableness of the claim, the expectedness, the almost obligatoriness of saying that your holy man rises from the dead in the context of every other figure doing so, it's just a check mark that you have to have. Resurrection and Reception in Early Christianity by Richard C. Miller.
Is this absolute truth, or is this some other kind of truth?
It opens. Don't go back to precept, dude. You made an evidential claim about Jesus' resurrection, so deal with it. So resurrection, reception.
There's only one worldview where you would be able to deal with anything, and it sounds like you're just waffling.
From Justin the Martyr, who I think you would agree is a very holy and important Christian. Justin the Martyr, in 150 CE, in response to persecution of Christians by the Roman Emperor Antonius Pius, says, quote, when we affirm that the Logos, God's firstborn begotten without a sexual union, namely our teacher Jesus Christ, was sacrificed, died, rose, and ascended to heaven, we are conveying nothing new with respect to those whom you call the sons of Zeus, Hermes, the interpreting word and teacher of all, Asclepius, who though he was a great healer, was struck by a thunderbolt and ascended to heaven, Dionysus also, after he had been torn limb from limb, Heracles, once he had committed himself to the flames to escape the soil, the sons of Leda, and Dioscuri, Perseus, son of Danae, Bellerophon, who though sprung from mortals rose to heaven on the horse of Pegasus. For what shall I say of Ariadne and those like her who have been declared to be set amongst the stars? And what about the emperors who die among you, whom you deem worthy to be forever immortalized, and for whom you bring forward someone who swears to have seen Caesar, once having been consumed by fire, ascended into heaven from the funeral pyre? He is saying, they all do it, you do it, it's nothing special. So the claim that Jesus rose from the dead is metaphysically unique or special is wrong. The claim that it is true can be demonstrated to be likely false, because it is likely a feature that arose from all the other examples. It is mimesis. It is copying of a popular trope that everyone used. They said that Jesus rose from the dead because all the holy people rose from the dead. That's what cool dead people did when they were holy, is they rose. And it's a much more likely explanation.
Are you going to repeat that again now for another 5 minutes?
Well, no, I want to add on to that, actually. I just want to add on one piece to that. I also want to say that it isn't biologically possible, from everything that we know of human anatomy, that after 72 hours of decomposition, the body has already started to break down. And so you would need a very high standard of evidence to actually prove that someone biologically resurrected from the dead. But I agree with everything just Ick said. He's not the first person in history. Wasn't even a rare thing. It was a common Mediterranean trope. So we can stick on that one. Either point, really.
Okay, so do you guys believe in absolute truth? Or is this just
that is a politically correct? Okay, X will take it. So he's saying yes.
Mathematical truths exist.
You believe in mathematical truths. Very cool. Okay. So, scientific empiricism, human reason, social contracts, or personal experience? I guess you're going to go for science and empiricism, right?
Yeah, but why don't we engage with the maximally true thing, right?
The problem of induction. There you go. That's the debunker for your worldview.
Also, why, Zape, they don't answer questions? That is a telltale tale of presuppositionalism.
See this?
You have to get them backed on the script. In fact, generally speaking, you just, when they ask anything you ask, resurrection, how do you know their God exists, they just have to assert that
Come on, man. You guys have been going on for ages. I thought it was my turn.
Necessary for truth.
To be fair, Notfox, you did literally just like give up on Jesus' resurrection and just switch back to your script. You are following
we need a
you're
system
the
through which
typical
we can
stereotype
justify
precept.
things.
Because you're
We
saying,
need to be
look,
able to
I
have
believe
a common
Jesus rose from the dead,
understanding
but
of
if you
certain
ever challenge
things.
me on any
And
empirical
so
question,
we've
rather
got
than
to go
defend an evidential
through
question,
and see if your
I'm just
worldview
going to
can
go back
justify
to
things.
You interrupted
It's
it.
ridiculous. Look, you said you use science and empiricism to justify things that you believe. This is the response. Look, if you're going to critique our position, then you're going to have a worldview that's rational. This is where you get to. This is where they got to. This is where you get to. Right?
But you haven't been able to show
That's
us
where
why
you get
you
to
think.
the problem of induction. Bang. Is that
Why
not a
do
problem
you
for
think
you?
Jesus resurrected? Do you have an actual
Is
explanation?
Greg Botson wrong about this? Is the Bonson bot wrong
But
about this particular
induction is
claim?
a problem that everyone shares, right? But what you can do, given
That's not
an
a problem
inductive,
in a Christian worldview.
what you can do in an inductive situation is you can do error elimination. So if you understand Hack's crossword analogy for found herentism, you understand that by comparing all of the findings until you eliminate the ones that more strongly support and contradict the weaker ones, you end up with a perfectly solved crossword puzzle that can't be solved any other way. In the same way that if I start out with like a mathematical puzzle and I have mathematical clues and I follow until I satisfy
you guys about Hack.
No,
I
you
basically
didn't.
told you guys.
No,
I did. I
you're a
popularized
joke.
Hack
We learned about it
by
in
completely
the
wrecking our
epistemology
whole
textbook
worldview and
because we
then
actually
making a
read
Christian version
epistemology
of it
books.
that was even better. That's what
No,
I did. That's what I'm known
Christian
for.
claims, right?
You're funny. You're funny because you think that Hack is compatible with Precept. It's not. It's the defeater for Precept, right? Hack is the defeater for Precept. You can't be a found herentist and be a Precept. It makes no fucking sense.
Hack doesn't make any sense whatsoever. The kind of found herentism that I argue for makes complete sense. We've got justified true beliefs that is knowledge that's justified within the principle of sufficient reasoning and accounted for within a coherent web of justified beliefs. Susan Hack is a hack. Her worldview can't do that. Okay, she's irrational just like the rest of you guys, just making arbitrary presuppositions. Look at this. This is where you get to on the thing. The problem of induction. And it just got, and then you even admitted it straight afterwards. What did he say, guys? He said that's a problem for everybody. Well, no, it isn't. It's not a problem for the person who bases their worldview based on a social construct. That's got a completely different debunker. That's an arbitrary foundation.
God.
Okay, so look, we've got the whole. This is it. This destroys your whole worldview.
Well, can I ask?
I'm going to make a neural network, so we've got a Greg Botson bot, and you guys are going to get destroyed constantly. I'm going to set it on all of your profiles online, and you're going to get harassed by the Botson bot for the rest of your lives. That's what's going to happen.
Now that we've established you don't have a reason for why you think that Jesus resurrected, let's move on to another point. What is a justified true belief?
There's all of the historical documents. There's the Shroud of Turin. There's all of the testimony and stuff like that. So
sure,
it's just
hearsay and a hoax.
An
actual known hoax. I don't understand why you push the Shroud of Turin. Why are you giving
that's not a hoax? You need to
con
look at
artists? Okay, so is there blood on it? Can we make a copy of Jesus? Be cool.
So why does Christianity?
The blood on it, actually, this is really interesting. Let me mention this because this is super interesting. The blood on the cloth, when tested, came back where basically the line was from the mother was the line of David, but the line on the father's side was inconclusive. So that was a super cool, interesting fact about the blood that they tested of Jesus.
But you are saying it's Jesus. We could take this blood and make a copy of Jesus or a clone of Jesus. Maybe? Huh?
Maybe I'm getting that confused with the blood. I don't know. Was it Ron White or something? I can't remember. You know, all of it's like a mush in my brain now.
Too easy. Justified true belief. Do you have one?
About Jesus. What? So why do I think that Jesus resurrected? We've got the Shroud of Turin. We've got the historical justifications based on all of the manuscripts and stuff like that that point to the resurrection of Jesus. We've got the fact that the Bible is true and it's got all of this amazing stuff in it that you wouldn't be able to know unless, you know, you were reasoning towards the ultimacy that you were.
Yeah, how do you know the Bible?
The only way that, well, look, so Isaiah or something like that, how was he able to prophesize that Jesus would come? Right? How was he able to know that
What do you mean? How
That
did he
God
prove?
would come in the flesh and be pierced for our transgressions. How would he know that? Well, it's because he was reasoning to that which would be perfection. Obviously, the perfect God would come into the world as the perfect example and save the world from its own iniquities. That's how he knew he'd come, because Jesus is perfect. And, this was a perfect world, and you're lucky to be here. And you should, instead of, this is what you guys do, you go into these nihilistic slumbers.
It's not nihilism. It's trying to be that we're relating ideas and promoting skepticism.
You should be grateful for what you have, and you should be thankful to Jesus
I am
Christ
grateful,
for his
not for
sacrifice.
Jesus, because Jesus is dead. Remember that Jesus isn't perfect. Not only was Jesus perfect, but I would make the claim that any religion or person that is trying to claim that they are perfect is a scam. They are trying.
Is that absolute truth, or is this?
I don't believe.
Do you want to go down the? You want to go down the logic tree again?
No, I'd rather you explain the difference between absolute truth and truth.
It's maximally true.
I don't want to add any words. I have this rule. As soon as we get to 2 words,
one of them is true in such a way that it could not be false, and what you're claiming is truth, which obviously isn't true, is something that could be false. So we've got something that is true.
Wait. The truth could be false.
That couldn't be false.
The truth could be false.
Something that's true could not be false.
Something that's true could not be false. So we don't need absolute truth. That's a politically correct word. Whoosh.
No, that's what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about truth, we're talking about absolute truth. For some reason, you guys start claiming there's some kind of fallibilist interpretation of truth. No, and that just means that you believe it rather than you know. You don't know because you don't have information that can account for the necessity of the claim. You believe it.
You're making up your own version of
presuppositions or something like that.
That your truth somehow is a different type of truth. Somehow it can't just be God either exists or he doesn't exist. That's either true or not true. It's not absolutely true or absolutely not true. It is either true or not true. By adding on words, you are muddying the water, making it less able for people to understand what you're saying, and I don't think that's accidental. I do think that is part of...
I don't know if anyone could understand what you were saying. You were saying it's true or new, or it sounded like a cat in the hat type rap. So I didn't really get that.
I'll be honest with you. We're getting closer then to presuppositionalism. You only need truth. Truth equals truth. You don't need absolute.
Well, you've got to start with a worldview that can account for truth. If you're going to make claims about what is right and stuff like that, then surely you're going to have a foundation that can account for truth. That's reasonable, I think, anyway. I mean, maybe you guys have some other standards that you're operating by, but if you're going to go around making proclamations about the world, then surely you're going to have some kind of framework through which you can justify the things that you're saying, right?
Something that's true is it corresponds with reality. If I say, is it true that a hamburger costs $1 at this place? It is either true or not true. Let me ask you this.
Is it possible for something to correspond... to seem to correspond to so is it possible that you see something and it seems to correspond to reality, but actually in reality you were deceived?
Could something on the face be truthful but be lying and deceitful? Yes, on the face a person could be not cheating on you and they could actually be lying and deceiving you.
I don't know if you've worded that how I would have worded it, but I think I get what you're saying. So you can be tricked by some kind of illusion or something like that. Right. So how do you know that you're not just? How do you know that you're not just deceived about everything else that you think about the external world?
It depends on the claim. It depends on how much evidence we have. So, for example, I am as close to as knowing something with biology, like how someone is being born, because we have a wealth of knowledge about how babies are formed.
So when you're saying you have a wealth of knowledge, is that stuff that you could be wrong about?
Is it stuff that we could be wrong about? Yes, but it would have to have a high bar.
So then you can't really refer to that as the foundation when it's not really a solid ground. Sure. You know?
Just because something can be wrong.
So where are we going to go?
Because it's true. Just because you're saying that something
How do you know it's true?
Cannot be true, because that's where the
you
evidence
don't know it's
lays.
true. That's the point. This is the point that I've been making the whole time.
We do know it's true. You're just asserting there's a
You
special
don't. You
kind
just
of
literally
truth.
said you don't know anything's true. You said you don't have absolute truth.
But we can test it. Well, absolute truth, because that's
But
not, you guys made that up. There's no such thing as absolute truth.
Okay, so what do you mean when you say something's true?
I mean, it corresponds to reality. So if I were to go up to that burger place,
okay, so how do you know something corresponds to reality?
That, like I said, let's go through the example. I believe that a burger costs $1, and I go to the person and I say, "Hey, I want a burger," and they say, "Oh yeah, well it costs $1." Well, I've just verified my epistemology.
Could it be a dream?
Could it be a dream? Yeah, but in my dream, that dollar still.
There you go. So that undermines it. No, because you could go to the store the next day in real life, and then they'd be like, "No, actually, it's not $1; it's $3," and you'd be fucked.
Well,
so
yeah,
you've
then
got
you would have to readjust your reality, and then you would know the truth.
You don't readjust your reality; you readjust your perception of reality. Yeah.
Well, okay.
But the thing is that we don't need to readjust. This is what you guys have to do. You're constantly changing, always with, you've got these bullshit claims that you make about, mathematics and stuff like that. And then you're always changing and undermining yourselves. In the Christian worldview, we don't do that. We have knowledge which we can justify in a coherent way. We've got rational foundation for our belief system. We've got justified true beliefs which are accounted for properly within the principle of sufficient reason.
Truth.
And if anybody doesn't believe me, I will genuinely debate an AI in front of you guys, and you'll be able to see that Presup always defeats the atheists.
You just saying you have the truth and you can't be wrong doesn't make it any more correlated to the truth.
Do you want to go through the flowchart again?
I would if you take out the word absolute. If you take out the word absolute.
What do you mean? Still. Oh my God!
I believe that you using that is your.
If you take out the word absolute, okay. So saying. No, it's ridiculous because take out the word absolute. Like,
honestly,
it's
I
just
think the flowcharts are ridiculous.
What is truth if it's not absolute truth?
We used to make fun of precepts because it's what. Well, again, truth. You don't need to add a precursor to it. You just need to say truth. Truth is what corresponds.
Okay, so truth you can be wrong about something that's true, could you?
Can you be wrong as untrue? Yeah.
You couldn't be wrong about something that you know to be true.
It wouldn't actually be. It would be my knowledge of it. I would be wrong about it. Like,
okay, so if something is true, if something is true and you believe it, then you couldn't be wrong about that.
Is it true? It corresponds with reality.
If it's true and you believe it, could you be wrong about that?
Not if it's true. If it's actually
okay. So
true.
name one thing about the external world that you could not be wrong about.
That you could not. That's not. Again, you could be wrong about anything, but
so you don't know anything. So what's the so why should we respect your opinion when you've just completely discredited it? You just discredited yourself.
My opinion actually gets you knowledge. You just assert things you don't know.
That's a claim that you can't justify. What is knowledge if you can't justify truth?
How do you know there is a God?
Oh, because because in order for something to be true, there has to be an authority that can account for the truth value of the proposition, and you exist. So that's why. So there's an authority that accounts for that truth. That's what God is. God is the authority that makes propositions true in a worldview. So the God is necessary.
You don't know how he actually exists. You're just asserting that he's necessary. You just
no. So God is so that in order for something to be true, there has to be an authority that makes it true.
I disagree.
You couldn't have something be okay. So how could something be true without some kind of authority to make it true?
It's like saying, is the rock hard? It's either true or not true.
That's not the same.
It's not a God making it hard. It is either true or not true.
Okay, so you're saying it's an emergent property of the naturalistic and materialistic world. You're saying the truth emerges as a natural phenomenon in a physicalist world?
We have 8 planets. That is true.
Is there anything that transcends the physical world?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Okay. So then, what are we left with? We're left with. So you believe in a world that is entirely physical. So if you apply the first and second law of thermodynamics, right? If there would, because basically that's what exists in the world, right? We see that systems break down over time.
We're not in a closed system. Our solar system is actually getting, excuse the pun, but we are getting light, day and night. We're getting energy 24/7.
So you're saying that there's some kind of outside force that intervenes in the world that accounts for an increase in like energy in the universe or something?
Not the universe. It's the sun. It's in the universe. It increases the energy on the Earth. It's why the Earth is.
That's still good. You're saying it's an open system, though. Is it a closed system or is it an open system?
The universe is an open system.
Well, you're describing a closed system. When you say the sun's in the universe and that's where it gets the energy, you're not describing something outside of the universe.
It's not. I'm describing something outside of the universe.
Okay, so is it a closed? So what? Why is it an open? What makes it an open system? Let's ask that one.
Because again, the sun is pouring energy into us. Eventually, the pressures will win.
You're saying that
gravity will win, and our star will be no more, and then the functions of Earth, much of the functions will cease to exist.
You're just saying that the atmosphere that we live in on the Earth, like that's an open system. That's what you're describing. The sun gets in through like the ozone layer.
Criticized for the second law of thermodynamics. They are misunderstanding the scope.
I was talking. Well, it's funny that you mentioned scope because I was talking about the entire universe, not just our system here on Earth.
What about it?
Well, basically, if you believe it's an open system, then there has to be something that transcends the physical world. If you believe it's a closed system, then well, we could talk about that, but
we have no idea. It could be that there's a multiverse. It could be that this is the only universe that there is.
That's a contradiction. I look. I hate to say it, guys. I feel like this is a dub for me. What can I say? I mean, I saved Wise Ape's life. I don't know if you guys know about that, but I, helped him increase his life expectancy significantly as well. And I think he's going to come around to Jesus Christ eventually. So you guys should thank me for that. And if you guys, are interested, want to go down the flow chart or something like that, then just drop me a message.
So do you want to read the book about the similarity of Jesus's resurrection to all the other stories that were surrounding it and the contextual reasons to think that it is mimesis or copying?
I already answered that.
In early Christianity.
Answer to that. Look,
Richard C. Miller.
Look, there's
resurrection
an answer
and reception
to that,
in early Christianity.
Okay, I heard you like 3 times. Okay, so the fact is that there's a lot of people out there that know the truth about Christianity, that hate Christianity, and they go around trying to deceive people into believing in these weird ideas about, an ancient past that's beyond, Christian roots and stuff like that. And really, that just takes you back to Egypt and them essentially worshipping the devil and other material things over God.
And
you've seen over and over again throughout history what happens to people when they forget about God. The fact is that, there's a lot of Satanists out there that are trying to rewrite history, but the only worldview that can account for truth and meaning in a rational way, and also is able to give you a clear path of lineage from Jesus all the way back to Adam is the Christians. Obviously the Jews as well, but the Jews don't believe in the Old Testament. We believe in the Old Testament, not them. So yeah, basically, we're the only ones that have a rational basis and a clear understanding of the lineage all the way back from you know, the very first man. So we've been writing down the names of our forefathers. And this is the difference between humans and animals, is that we take note and we have respect for the people that went before us, right? And the animals, right, they don't write down the names of their forefathers. And so their forefathers are forgotten about, you know, they're lost to history. And that's what will happen to the atheists, because they don't appreciate their heritage, they don't appreciate the truth. And so, you know, just bit by bit, you know, your castle will be destroyed, you know. This foundation that you're trying to rest on is falling apart at the seams, you know.
You know, we can write too, right? We have books, we tell stories.
Yeah, but you just don't care. You don't respect the people that came before you. You know what I'm. They'll be talking about Neil deGrasse Tyson and his sexual assault charge.
Can I just hold on? You are actually eliminating most of human history. So humans have been around for 100 to 200,000 years. What you are doing is taking most of humanity that has come before, and you're saying, nah, I don't think you exist because that doesn't fit with my biblical narrative.
That's not what I said.
Oh, then you're not respecting the hundreds of thousands of years of human history that came before your religion?
I don't agree with you on that. Obviously, you know, we had Adam. We had Adam, and then Jacob went into slavery. I'm sure you guys know. And then essentially the Exodus happened, and they didn't find their way to
none
the
of the historical evidence for these things happening is there. The problem with all of these claims is that the Exodus didn't happen, conquest didn't happen, the archaeology is all against it. Like, I'm playing nice when I just try to ask you to substantiate.
Both of you were destroyed.
I'm playing nice when I ask you to just substantiate the resurrection of Jesus and establish why it's not mimesis of like all of the other examples of holy people that rose from the dead that Justin the Martyr pointed to, right?
That's just being
nice and picking the late claim of a person who said that if you believe in Moses, you would believe in me because Moses wrote of me. The idea that Moses wrote the Pentateuch is farcical. This Pentateuch contains sentences like Moses was the humblest man who ever lived. So if you're asking me to believe that Moses wrote about himself, that Moses is the humblest man who ever lived, and that the Pentateuch is written by him, which Jesus is claiming,
it's already crumbled. I already dismantled it.
I don't know what to tell you. If you think that Moses is going to say Moses is the humblest man who ever lived in his own autobiography,
do you want me to zoom in on the flowchart again so that you can see the debunking?
No, because as predicted, and as pointed out, every time you make a claim,
it's been a good
you made a historical claim, you said historically that you think that the Exodus happened. When I point out that the Exodus didn't happen, when I point out that all the archaeology is against that and the other events in the Bible happening, you just say, let's go back to the flowchart. I want to play precept. Well, this doesn't feel good. I don't like evidential claims that I know nothing about and can't defend. I just choose to believe that they're true because my flowchart. You think the flowchart means that the historical things happened because you think the flowchart couldn't be any other way. But the historical evidence is that all of the things in the Bible, like the Exodus, physically couldn't have happened. So the flowchart is probably wrong too.
And it's probably not humble to claim that you're the best at being humble, right?
It's literally a self-contradictory statement to say you're the humblest man that ever lived. Yes. Which is why the whole idea of like Mosaic authorship is just like it's a guess that the Talmud says, you know, they just assume, but they don't really know. And it is absurd that he would have narrated events after his own death, and obviously he didn't. Obviously, the physical evidence that the population of Judea is the exact opposite when we graph it and we excavate every single home in it, and we measure how many people live there, and it's the exact opposite of the Exodus. When there are fewer people during all the time periods where the Exodus is supposed to have happened, they just migrated elsewhere because there wasn't enough rain for their crops, and they had to take their goats to a different location to do their agriculture somewhere else. That's what the evidence shows. The Exodus cannot have happened. The physical evidence makes it impossible. Anyway, let's play the flowchart. Let's go back to the flowchart. I don't like evidence claims. Flowchart.
Get wrecked, nerd. got fucking dominated, dude.
Absolutely dominated.